Here's an email question, Father. This is from an anonymous. He asks, or she asks, in regard to the use of NFP, is it up to the married couple to prayerfully discern when they should and should not use NFP, or are they required to consult a priest about whether or not their circumstances are considered valid to use it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's maybe another email question too regarding, there's some who've even exaggeratedly called natural family planning something sinful, or we see in the documents of the church when we first become more knowledgeable of, okay, what is the woman contributing to conception and how does fertility work, through the mid 19th century into the 20th century. And the church is very clear that, okay, this is not impeding conception. Simply observe natural times of infertility, that people are not to be told that this is forbidden as if it were an intrinsically evil act. So there's no debate on that point. And then it's really a question of how are you fulfilling your duty to be fruitful and multiply? So remember, this is why you got married, right? This is the primary end of marriage, to be fruitful and multiply and to fill the earth. From that extends it. There we consider ourselves just as individuals. I owe the common good of society. It all falls apart unless we have, unless we're reproducing and providing, support for the rest of society. So, and then the kingdom of God, right? We only have vocations. We only have priests. It's going to wind up basically us versus the Muslims in the end. And the average Muslim woman has 7 children. So who will inherit the earth? Well, those who love life more and are more convinced about their faith. So we remember how we got here because our parents and grandparents, great-grandparents were generous in fulfilling this duty. So that said, there are also secondary ends of mutual help and a remedy for concupiscence. Those are also goods. And so a married couple can engage in marital intimacy for those ends as well, even after, the woman might be no longer fertile, for example, and after menopause. And so that's all very clear in Catholic theology that they can engage in this as well. So when it comes to, can you reasonably space out children? You can, of course. Virtue is to act in accordance with reason. Then the churches and the theology of the church, you hear reference to, okay, there should be a just reason if you're not fulfilling this first law. And, no one's a good judge of their own case. So you would always want to seek your priest's, a good priest's advice, your pastor, your confessor, to say, Father, is it, well, I just want to have another big screen TV like my neighbor has. Well, you're really going to compare the big screen TV with another child? And I don't know any parents who said, yeah, we shouldn't have had that child. We messed up on it. In terms of, you always, that's the end of your marriage, the greatest good that can come of it. So all that said, at the same time, the church doesn't tell parents how many children they have to have, right? And nor that they have to positively. What is the obligation is that they have to render this marital debt to each other, right? Marriage is to say, this is my body given up for you. You're handing over your body to the other person. So whenever anyone requests that marital debt, the other is obliged, and that's of the essence of their marriage, right? Sometimes it might feel like a sacrifice too, and particularly for the wife sometimes, but that this is a debt that they fulfill towards each other. So one always has to attend the other, and it's only by mutual accord that they can dedicate themselves to abstinence. But they can do that for many reasons, and the church, mentions physical, emotional, economic, spiritual. So you want to always go to your priest to help discern those. But there are, even spiritual reasons, St. Paul says, to abstain for a time, to just dedicate yourself more to prayer. There's even the possibility of a Josephite marriage in certain cases being valid, but just dedicated to some spiritual end while not having children or not engaging in marital intimacy. So it'd be an exaggeration to say, well, the church says you have to have as many children as possible. There's obviously no clear obligation in that regard. If there were, then it would say you have to have time, have to have relations during fertile times. No one's ever heard of that commandment. You have the mutual debt that you have to pay, but so it's often going to be, if they, moralists discuss this, there's a good treatment of this by 2 Jesuits, Ford and Kelly, in the early 1960s. And they said, well, maybe in these circumstances at this place, you could say having 4 children, you've multiplied and it contributed to the obligation of providing for the common good of society. But you could have had 10, right? And maybe you'll regret that at the end of your life. But are you sinning there? Unless there's a clear obligation, St. Alphonsus and others are very much going to emphasize you have this holy liberty. Unless there's a clear obligation, you're not necessarily sinning. It could be an imperfection, a lack of generosity, but not necessarily a sin. So, but in short, yeah, you want to go to your priest to obviously help discern those just reasons and what's really important, and your mission in life. Again, that's that's how we increase the kingdom of God in the end.